I remember doing a temperature check with a thermal imaging camera, and on that camera, it was 550 degrees Celsius in that landing, in that lobby area, and that was without direct flame. I could already feel my wrists burning. I could already feel my neck burning. And I knew that I had very, very limited time in that lobby area, in the building. I had limited time, not least because of my levels of oxygen that I had left, but because of the actual heat that was there. I was burning. My colleague managed to get the other end of the hose plugged in, and I was beginning to untangle the length of hose I had. Just as I finished that, I heard my emergency whistle go off, which tells me I should already be out of the building. That tells me I've got between 8 to 12 minutes of air left. Now, again, our procedures, our protocols are, if you are inside a building when that whistle goes off, you fail your course. It's that critical that you're out the building by that point. I'm on the 15th floor with no water, surrounded by fire, in 550-degree heat with a person to rescue. Straight away, training kicks in, and I think, right, well, this is far from ideal. However, I can supplement my air from Leon's. I can plug into his set. And then right on cue, in the distance, I hear his emergency whistle going off to tell him that he is running out of air. All right, let's do this.
Ricky, how's it going?
Good, thank you. Good. Been a busy couple of weeks with life generally, but yeah, everything's good.
I can imagine. Can I just say that I don't think in the very short history of this podcast, have I ever tried to chase a potential podcast guest. I don't know if you remember, first time I ever saw you was at the Freshly Grounded live tour in London. And I went out I saw your amazing kind of performance there, and I went out for the halftime break, and I saw you and I was like, do you know what? I really want to get this guy on my podcast. Let me chase after him. You being the absolute specimen you are, your brisk walking space with my full pacing, speeding kind of run. And before the minute I reached to where I saw you, you were halfway on the other end of London. So I had to then reach out on a DM to say, look, mate, I tried to catch you, but you're too quick for me.
Yeah, sometimes it's nice to get home quickly after these events.
Yeah, mate, that was brilliant. By the way, for those that don't know, so Ricky was on Freshly Grounded, and you might have seen him on a very viral clip that has been. I mean, to be honest, it comes on my feed once every other day. Your famous quote, which we'll get into later, and then you followed that up with a performance on his live tour. You did a kind of motivational speech, and my God, mate, you had the room in genuine. Like, I heard sniffles from everywhere. I think next to me was this huge 6'5" geezer. He was 6 foot tall, 6'5" wide, big beard, and I heard him sniffle as well, mate. You had us all kind of contemplating a lot of things.
Well, I mean, thank you, first of all. That is a glowing report, to say the least. I think that when I never set out to be a keynote speaker, but what I found is through my journey through poor mental health, the more I spoke about things, the more people got in touch to say thank you or to give me their story and their background and let me know how things that I've said or points I'd raised have helped them in some way or another. And I realized that not only is talking about these things really important because it helps people deal with and process their own emotions and their own stuff, but also it's the way that you talk about these things that becomes vitally important. And for me, it's just a level of absolute brutal honesty, which includes, if you remember from the talk, it includes some things that I'm not proud of, some things that I got really, really wrong through my journey through PTSD and depression. But the power in being vulnerable and making yourself vulnerable is incredible. And the more honest you are, the more you engage with an audience, and the more believable you are as a speaker and as a human being, the more chance there is you'll impact people in the way that you're hoping. And so far, that's worked really well for me.
Go on and tell the world, first of all, who you are, and then in the theme of this podcast, what your one message to the world be. Let's pretend for a second that I've got more than a handful of listeners. Let's pretend everyone in the world's listening. What would you want to tell everyone?
So I'm a firefighter, and I've been a firefighter for 18 years. I have come across many, many different people from all walks of life. I have Malaysian in my family. I have Caribbean in my family. I have Greek in my family. And the world is a melting pot, and London particularly is a melting pot. And I stumbled across this theory, I guess you could call it, that our differences is what actually makes us a part of a very well put together team. Our differences in terms of different religions or different skin colors or different nationalities. We've always, and when I say we, it's a collective noun, you know, I'm not saying everybody does this, but as a race, as a human race, we divide ourselves constantly through various different means, through supporting football teams or religions or nationalities. And a lot of that is banter, and a lot of it has real undertones. So what I came to realize is that much like with a football team, if you want to be the same as everybody else to fit in, or you want everybody else to be the same as you to fit in terms of a football team, to simplify things, you'd end up with 11 strikers. You'd probably score some goals, but you'd have no strength in the midfield. You'd have a useless goalkeeper, and you'd have a terrible defensive line. And that's the same in every single team. And in actual fact, what makes a team work is the individuality and uniqueness of each person. And we have that in abundance in this country and all over the world. We have this diversity that we should be clinging to and celebrating. So instead of using the differences as a divisive force, we should be celebrating the differences. If there's something we don't understand, we should be contacting that person. And we should be saying, I don't understand why you do this, rather than be fearful of it because we don't understand it. Learn about it. Get rid of the fear, because we are only ever fearful of things we don't understand. So I guess in summation, my one message to the world would be celebrate the diversity that surrounds us and allow that to be the glue that forms a team, brings us back into being a working human race, because there is only one race ultimately, the human race.
I just wish I did actually have the world listening, because that is, I think it's the first time I have not asked in advance what a message is. And that's completely kind of taken me away. Where does that stem from? I mean, were you surrounded by diversity in childhood? Where does this whole push of celebrating differences come from?
I kind of had it from both sides, I guess, which is why I think the views I have. I grew up in Kent until I was 12 in a very, very white area. There was one Asian guy in my school. I couldn't tell. I think he was Indian. And other than that, pretty much everybody in the school was white. It was a very posh grammar school. You weren't allowed to abbreviate. You had to enunciate correctly. It was very strict. And due to the family situation, I moved to London overnight. My parents were separated from when I was 3. And I moved to live with my dad. I went to visit him for the weekend, and due to things that had gone on at home, I never went home again. I just stayed in London. And in order for my dad to be able to say to the courts, I deserve custody of my children for their safety, and I've managed to put into place all of these things, a structure, a home environment that works, he had to have us in school. So we didn't have time to search around for necessarily the right school. So I went to a school called Ernest Bevan in Tooting, which I joined when I was 12 years old. And I went from being one of 1,000 white children in a school that had one Indian guy to being one of 6 white kids in my year in a school in Tooting Bec. And I was surrounded by black people, Africans and Caribbeans mostly, and then a lot of Arabic state kids, Indians, Pakistanis, Sri Lankans, Chinese. And I was the minority, and considerably the minority. And I realized that in that environment, it didn't matter that I'd come from a grammar school. It didn't matter that I enunciated or spoke really well. I was not going to do well and succeed at that school if I had any kind of prejudice or any kind of views that I was better than anybody else. And luckily I didn't arrive there with those views in the first place. So I was ignorant to the mixtures of ethnicities and religions because I wasn't ever exposed to them. But thankfully my lack of exposure didn't result in systemic racism or prejudice. It just resulted in ignorance. So that ignorance was corrected when I arrived at this school. And what I found was this incredible mix of people, this melting pot of opinions and views. And it was exciting. It was scary. I won't lie to you. I was scared for a while when I got there. But it was exciting because suddenly not everybody thought the same as me. Not everybody told the same jokes or spoke the same way or came from the same places. Everyone was different. And I realized then in that small, tiny pinprick of a place on a world map that in actual fact, the world is a huge, huge place. And it made me realize that made life fun. That made life exciting for me. And that's, I guess, when I first really started looking into different things and in terms of religions and stuff like that and enjoying the differences that surrounded me.
What going back to your point about kind of differences, do you remember what the biggest and kind of the most notable difference was when you first went to that school? Was it the way, I know you referred to the way people spoke and how they acted, but what was the one biggest difference between you and all these other kids from all around the world?
Well, I guess with the black kids particularly, the biggest notable difference was white people are very individual by appearance alone, a lot of the time. To me, from what I was used to, you could have blue eyes, green eyes, brown eyes. You can have tanned, non-tanned. You can have freckles. You can have pale skin. You can have red faces. You can have all different hair colors, different hairstyles. White people, for me, were very easily distinguishable. And then I realized in coming to Ernest Bevin, because I hadn't been around black people, and this is going to sound horrendous, but I'm saying it for this reason, black people looked the same to me. Dark hair, dark eyes, dark skin. And what I realized is that in order to be an individual as a black person in that school, it could only be with your personality. It could only be with the actual important things about you. So characters were much bigger. And that was lovely to see. And obviously once I had got used to the different environment that I was in, obviously there were huge differences in appearance, in how black people look. And the differences in where I started and where I ended up are amazing. I mean, by the time I'd left school, I could pretty much look at a Caribbean guy and tell you whether he was Jamaican or Bajan, based on how they look and a slight difference in their accent. I could do the same between Ghanaians and Nigerians. If you're not going to divide them with their love of jollof rice, you've got to do it with, other differences in how they look. And it's mad to think that the journey I went on was so extreme in that when I turned up, a Caribbean and an African basically looked the same to me. By the time I left, I could tell the difference in what part of Africa they were from or what part of the Caribbean they were from or their heritage bloodline was from.
I had a guest on my kind of first or second episode, and he had grown up, actually. He'd spent the first kind of the formative years of his life in rural Nigeria. And he obviously kind of grew up around them, spent a good 10 years there before moving to an international boarding school in London and then back to his middle class family. And it almost occurs to me that the people that have been subject is not the right word, the people that have been thrown together with other kind of nationalities and races very early on in their life have grown up to become much more tolerant. And it seems like that's pretty much the answer. Why not, could you solve this inherent problem of racism by bundling up as many nationalities as you can as early as possible in children's lives? You're probably best equipped to answer this. How do we end it? I mean, I know you can't really end an ideology, and I know racism has got deep roots, but what's one thing everyone can do to try and curb the problem so one day it doesn't exist?
I saw a fantastic meme not long ago, and it was a picture of a white kid looked about 3 hugging a black kid who looked about 3. And it simply said underneath, racism is learnt behaviour. And it was that simple. And it's such a powerful image because it's irrefutable. You can't argue that. No one is born racist. Racism is learnt through culture, through upbringing, through parenting, through friendship groups, which is why it's so difficult to combat, because it's so easy to corrupt a single person if they're surrounded by people that already have prejudiced views. So the only way, I think, the only chance you've got realistically of ending racism, or certainly I do think it's getting better in some parts of the world, but in others it's getting worse. But I think it has to be a multifaceted, a multi-sided approach to education. I think history needs to be taught better. No one need, in history, I learned about World War I, World War II. Great. I'm learning about the war against Germany. We love Germans. Germans are a part of the EU. I know we've left now, but we're still part of Europe. It always amazes me that there is less prejudice and hatred towards German people who only 80 years ago were slaughtering Jews and trying to kill my ancestors. There's less prejudice and hatred against them than there is towards black people that have done nothing to harm my community and my race of people, but that have been oppressed and murdered in their hundreds of thousands for 200 years. And when you actually think about that, it's mind-blowing that to think that it could work that way. So I think the only way of doing it is get the right education, the right history taught in schools, because black history is brutal. When you actually start learning about it, the way that black people were oppressed and the disgusting things that slave owners, white people, did to those people and their families should be learnt about, because then it brings with it a level of understanding where you think, right, now I understand. If you consider the police were enforcing the law of apartheid, when you then know that, and then someone says, well, I don't know why black people hate the police, because the police were enforcing the law of apartheid. A law does not constitute moral correctness. It just constitutes the law. And the law has evolved and changed as years have gone on. So in order to understand prejudice, you need to understand history, and the wrong history is being taught. So educate the children properly with the right history. Don't euphemize it. Don't make it seem nicer than it is. Don't leave bits out that you think are a little bit too gory or a little bit too offensive. They're the bits that are most important, because the true horrors of racism should be exposed to children at a young age so they understand. And then alongside that, parents need to be educated, because there is so much ignorance outside of major cities predominantly, but so much ignorance as to what actually went on. The amount of conversations I have with people when I talk about racism, and I tell them things and they go, really? No. And then they go away and look stuff up and they come back to me and go, oh my God, you were right. I can't believe that. And I just think, how have you got to this age and not known that? So it's all, the cure for everything is in education and exposure.
Ricky, the fireman. Tell me how that came about then.
I wanted to be a firefighter since I was 3 years old. My mum told me a story recently, actually. We were having a bit of a heart-to-heart about something. And she said she remembered me telling her when I was 3, one day, I think I'd seen a fire engine. And I said, one day I'm going to be a firefighter, Mum. And she said, and she remembers, she said to me like, oh, that's a lovely idea. And she said to me, she remembered thinking to herself, that probably won't happen, but what a lovely idea. And then 21 years later, there she is at my pass out parade. And, you know, I'm achieving my lifelong goal of becoming a firefighter. So it really is a story of, wanting to do something enough that you actually chase it and achieve it.
Do you remember what it was when you were 3? Was it just the bright lights and the big car, or was there something more to it?
I think when I was 3, it was probably just the bright lights and the big truck, and, you know, it all seemed very exciting. But by the time I was 10, I loved the idea of being the person that gets to save someone, being the person that gets to help someone on an immediate level. You know, lots of people help people in the world, charity workers and counsellors, but there is no immediate reward like being a firefighter. You cut someone out of a car crash and you put them on a back of an ambulance, and off they go, and you find out that they've lived. Immediate rewards, and I love that side of it.
Why though? Why do you think you had an inherent need to want to help people? Or take firefighting out of the equation. Do you think, again, I hear this in a lot of podcasts, and they always refer to things that happen in their kind of formative years that tend to form the foundation of who and the why of when they're older. Do you reckon you can figure out why you had that inherent need to help people?
Probably from feeling helpless as a kid. I mean, this is a very, it's going to be a very deep response, but there was a lot of violence in my childhood, and there were parental splits. I had a bully as an older brother, and I guess I never felt like anyone could help me. There was no one there to help me, to save me, to rescue me. And so I thought, well, there will be other people in the world that are like me. There are other people out there that can't, no matter how capable they are, of help themselves in certain situations. And so that can be me. Why not? Why can't that be me? Why can't I be the person that goes out and gets to hold someone's hand, look them in the eyes and tell them it's going to be okay. I am here, and now you are going to be okay. And it's a magical, beautiful thing to be able to do, to have that connection with another human being and to reassure them. And then to follow through on that, you know.
Can you tell me what the day was like when, you know, you mentioned, was it a call-out parade, you said it was?
A pass-out parade.
A pass-out parade. Close, I tried.
Yeah.
Can you tell me what it's like just standing there and being like, damn, I did what I wanted to do. I've achieved it. Because I know for a fact there's a very small population of people that actually manage to go on and live childhood dreams. What's it like? Just for maybe me, maybe I'm here telling you, like, what does it feel like to finally do what your inner child wanted you to do?
It's a bit of a whirlwind, to be honest, because I was really proud at every stage of the application phase. I think when I applied to join London, there was something like 10,000 applicants for every one available job. It was an insane battle against the odds. So just passing the application phase, as in the actual application form, was an achievement. So I was proud of that. And then passing the in-house assessments, I was proud of that. Passing the physical assessments, I was proud of that. So I was proud at each stage, you know, passing the interview. And then obviously arriving for your first day as a firefighter, I thought I would be filled with pride on that day, but I wasn't. I was filled with fear, because suddenly you realize you're now embarking on a 16-week, might have been 18 weeks, I can't remember, but 4 months of being shouted at and drilled and having to learn. So people don't realize how much we do as firefighters. The scope of our work is huge. It's enormous. And you have 4 months to learn enough so that when you get to a fire station, you're not going to kill someone by getting something wrong. There is a huge amount of pressure to learn and absorb this information. And it is really, really hard work. And so your sort of fight, flight, freeze, your parasympathetic system is kicking in, and you're just in a constant state of adrenaline. You go home exhausted. You're nervous for the next day. You come back in. So when I finally passed out, and just for anyone listening or watching, the pass out is a term we use for I passed an exam. You pass out, not physically passing out, becoming unconscious. So when I passed out from Southwark Training Centre, it was a mixture of relief that I'd got through and that I'd done it. There was obviously some pride there, but there was also then fear of the next step, which is going to an actual fire station and now having to mix with people, firefighters that have been doing my job, some of them for 20 years already. And I have to be up to scratch. I have to be good enough. So it was a constant level of the next bit, the next bit, the next bit. But all of that said, I was very, very lucky in that I was chosen by my squad to be the person that gives the final commands on the very last day of training at the end of our drill in front of all our friends and family. So I got to report to the officer in charge, come to attention, and then shout, "Drill complete, all gear made up, sir," in front of everybody. And then everybody claps and cheers. And, that final bit was for me. And I remember it was such a buzz being able to do that. And my dad was there, my mum was there, and some family members. And it was a real thrill to have that, on that day, in that moment.
Oh, I love it. If you're walking down the street and you came across 3-year-old Rick and he looked at you, what would he be thinking?
Well, if he knew it was him, he'd probably be really proud, I would imagine. If he didn't know it was him, he'd probably say, "Cool, that guy's had a hard life."
Oh, brilliant. Brilliant. What was, do you remember your first kind of your first big test? I know you said maybe a test in itself was just being around experienced firefighters, which for me just screams imposter syndrome. I know exactly how I'd feel in that situation. I do not belong here. Something's gone wrong. But do you remember your first kind of big test? Like, whoa, yeah, now I'm a firefighter. Or not even that, your first time you were genuinely scared.
I do, yeah. I'm smiling because well, I'll tell you the story. We were called to, it's the first fire I'd been called to since arriving at my fire station. So it'd only been a few weeks, and we were called to multiple calls, persons reported fire, which means more than one person has phoned the fire brigade to say they can see smoke or flame, which generally means you have definitely got something. And it was persons reported, which means that the occupants of the premises have since phoned the fire brigade and said, "We are trapped in here and we cannot get out. We need to be rescued." So my heart's racing on the way to the incident. We get there, and it's a first floor masonette with an entrance on the ground floor at the front of the property. The door was on fire and the hallway was on fire. So we smashed the door open. One of the guys behind us grabbed the hose reel, and myself and a colleague ran up the stairs. As we arrived, we'd already seen a mother and daughter at the window with smoke pouring out, screaming for help. So we just ran through the flames, ran up the stairs, got to the kitchen door where they'd shut themselves at the front of the property, opened the door. I grabbed the mum, my colleague grabbed the daughter, and we just dragged them backwards down the stairs. The flames were out by that point, so just straight through. We told them to take a deep breath. It's going to be hot. It's going to be uncomfortable, but we're going to get you out as quickly as possible. Dragged them out, and they were largely unscathed. And I was sort of wallowing in my own magnificence at this point, really buzzing, just rescued a human being. This is incredible. And then she's, the mum came round enough to start shouting, "They're still in there. They're still in there. My babies are in there." And my heart sank. And I was like, oh my goodness, there's more people, there's kids. And my governor shouted at me, "Rick, they're in the front room, 4 of them." And I spun round and legged it up the stairs. I didn't even wait for the rest. I was back in. I was like, I'm going to find these kids. And I remember going in the front room, and as I walked into the front room, it's very smoky. You can't see anything. There's no lights on. And I remember thinking, what on earth are 4 children doing in the front room? But I'm thinking they must be in like Moses baskets or something like that. So I remember feeling around, and I did a lap of the front room. It was quite small and I couldn't find anyone. And then I'm really starting to panic. So I'm like, by this point now, my safe movement is kind of gone a bit, and I'm knocking things over and smashing things. And I remember this, like I knocked the TV off the side, and that smashed on the floor, and I'm tripping over bits, and I'm really searching. And there was like a cage that I knocked over, and then another one, and then like some photos, and all this stuff's going everywhere. And I could not find these children. And I came running back outstairs, and I was breathing really heavily through the mask like this. And I shouted to the governor, "Gov, I can't find his kids." And he said, "What? When the kids? I can't find the kids." And he said, "What kids? You're looking for 4 budgies." And I remembered the 2 cages that I'd launched across the living room. And I was like, I think I know where they are. And I went back in, and I grabbed these 2 cages, and I came back out. And honestly, they were like these old-fashioned wire cages, like the Tweety Pie ones from the Tom and Jerry cartoons with a dome roof. And they were just battered. And there were like 4 semi-conscious birds sort of flapping about on the bottom of this cage. And I was like, I've got them. And I thought, God, I hope they don't notice the damage on the cages. Anyway, we finished the incident and went away, and no one really said anything about it. And I was thinking I'd got away with it. And then the local newspaper, the Hillingdon Gazette, printed, or the Uxbridge Gazette, I can't remember which one it was, but they printed an article in a newspaper because the mum and daughter came to visit us at the station and have a little photo with us and stuff. And there was a little bit at the bottom that said brave firefighters re-entered the property after rescuing the mother and daughter to rescue 4 finches that later unfortunately died at the vets due to smoke inhalation. And I thought, probably wasn't smoke inhalation, it was probably concussion, but I'm saying nothing. So yeah, it was a real mixture on that one. It was like embarrassment, it was fear, thinking that I'd left kids in there, it was pride at rescuing people. It was a whole myriad of emotions on that day.
So then if 3-year-old Ricky saw you and then realised you backhanded 4 budgies, potentially killing him, what would he think of you?
Well, I think it would be more important what I'd say to him. Always listen to the proper instructions. Do not run off before people have finished speaking.
Oh, wow. Talk about baptism of fire, literally.
So the night of Grenfell, we were called out to the fire. I think it was about 1:45 in the morning. We arrived, and there were flames going from the 4th floor up to the 24th, the top floor, and then back down again to probably around the sort of like the 14th, 15th floor, something like that, in a strange sort of burn pattern like that, which is very unusual. You normally would see fire in a window or 2 windows, maybe 3 windows if it's a bad fire, but they would all be next to each other or above or below in a block, grouped. And on this occasion, the burn pattern was completely different. And it was obviously, looking at it now, you can see it's external fire spread. But at the time, it was just confusion because nobody had ever seen anything like that before. So I remember the sense of urgency with getting into the building. I remember standing in the lobby area, and one of the first things that I was greeted with was a queue of very worried looking firefighters. And then 2 firefighters that came out, and the first one made direct eye contact with me. And he said, "Be careful in there." And that's something that's never happened before. No firefighters would say that to each other in an incident. Enough had happened in that building for him to be very scared. And fear is not something that we as firefighters are renowned for. We are normally really brave, unfazed, very well drilled, good equipment, highly trained. We're professional, we do what we do, and we get out. So to see fear in someone's eyes, I remember it impacted me quite a lot. And that firefighter was carrying a girl probably about 12 years old with black soot around her nose and corners of her mouth, not breathing and unconscious. And his colleague was carrying a second child around the same age, similar circumstances. And those two girls survived. They were given medical care outside the tower, and they survived, thankfully. But it made me realise this is bad. This is really bad. My first brief was to get to the 15th floor and rescue a man that was on a fire survival guidance call. Now that means that his only chance of survival is me. He is trapped by the conditions of the fire, and a member of our control staff will be on the phone to him until he is either rescued or dead, giving him fire survival guidance, all the information he needs to survive his environment long enough for me to get there. So if you are on an FSG rescue, what it means is that it's highly time critical, obviously, but it means that you are the only hope. So there's a lot of pressure on you, and a huge sense of urgency. I was then told that we weren't going to have any water. So at an incident, it is our protocol. It's drilled into us, drummed into us, that you do not go above a fire floor. Fire produces smoke. Smoke is effectively unburnt fuel. It's like petrol. So if you introduce a flame into smoke, it will ignite. Now, when smoke ignites, if it does it in an environment where there's enough and the mix of oxygen and smoke is right, it can actually explode and flash over. So that means the room will go from maybe 400, 500 degrees Celsius at floor temperature to in excess of 2,000 degrees Celsius. It's an unsurvivable event. So what we do is we gas cool. We use the water in our hose and we cool the gas layers down, the smoke down, so that it's below its auto ignition temperature, so that it can't ignite even if a flame is introduced, because it's not a high enough temperature. So when you get told you're going in and you're going to have no water, what that means is I'm going to be in an unsurvivable environment should that smoke catch fire, should those circumstances deteriorate. We were taking a length of rolled hose with us, an enforcer, which is like a giant battering ram for a door, a branch, which is the nozzle, and our fire gear and our BA sets. So all in all, it meant my colleague Leon and I would have probably been carrying about, I'm guessing around 40 to 50 kilos, possibly as high as 60 kilos of additional weight to our body weight. So it's more than half my body weight again that I'm now carrying up flight after flight after flight of stairs, whilst being in a restrictive breathing face mask, using up valuable air that is my only chance of survival. Also not knowing about the conditions above us, travelling through floors that are on fire with no way of protecting ourselves. It was a scary task, and it was one that I didn't think I would come out of, if I'm being completely honest. And I know that sounds really dramatic, and that's because it was really dramatic. I genuinely thought to myself before I went in, I'm not going to come out of this. And then I thought, well, if that's the case, if it goes that way, I need to make sure that I do everything I can, that my time inside this tower has been worthwhile. So I just thought about my training, my equipment, the task that lay ahead, and thought I'm going to make sure that I make this work. So Leon and I set off. We had a difficult journey to the 15th floor for several reasons. One, we couldn't keep count of the stairs that we'd gone up, as in how many flights of stairs. So it was difficult to work out what floor we were on. And the emergency, the stairwell lighting that had been retrospectively fitted by these awful building companies that were culpable in this fire, had fitted them over the floor numbers. So we couldn't even wipe soot from the walls and see what floor number we were on because it was covered up by a light. Now that meant the only way we could see what floor we were on is by coming off of a protected stairwell, which ventilation had failed for, so it wasn't a protected stairwell, it was engulfed in smoke, onto a fire floor, and then search in the darkness and flames with the backs of our leather gloves for door numbers to try and feel sort of Braille style what flat number it was, so that we could work out, well, there's 8 flats or 6 flats per floor. Therefore that's flat number whatever. So we're going to be on whatever floor. We had to do that twice before we made it to the 15th floor, and each time cost us air. Now, this meant that by the time we got to the 15th floor, we had the hose had spilled out and got tangled and knotted, which made things very difficult. It made the hose unusable. So in order to plug that in now and get water, I'm going to have to untangle that first. As I said, it was really hot, and I remember doing a temperature check with a thermal imaging camera, and on that camera it was 550 degrees Celsius in that landing, in that lobby area, and that was without direct flame. I could already feel my wrists burning. I could already feel my neck burning, and I knew that I had very, very limited time in that lobby area, in the building. I had limited time, not least because of my levels of oxygen that I had left, but because of the actual heat that was there. I was burning. My colleague managed to get the other end of the hose plugged in, and I was beginning to untangle the length of hose I had. Just as I finished that, I heard my emergency whistle go off, which tells me I should already be out of the building. That tells me I've got between 8 to 12 minutes of air left. Now, again, our procedures, our protocols are, if you are inside a building when that whistle goes off, you fail your course. It's that critical that you're out the building by that point. I'm on the 15th floor with no water, surrounded by fire, in 550 degree heat with a person to rescue. Straight away, training kicks in, and I think, right, well, this is far from ideal. However, I can supplement my air from Leon's. I can plug into his set. And then right on cue, in the distance, I hear his emergency whistle going off to tell him that he is running out of air. And it was at that point that I realised we probably weren't going to be able to achieve our objective. And I had a very brief conversation with Leon outside the guy's flat, and we made the decision to leave the guy behind, to not rescue him, and to make our way out of the building as quickly as we could. And it was the hardest decision I've ever had to make in my life. It was the most painful decision I've ever had to make in my life. And it cost someone their life. That guy did not survive. The sad truth is that it was the right decision, because had me and Leon stayed and tried to rescue him, we probably all would have died. And Leon and I got to go back into the building another 2 times that night and help rescue other people, which we couldn't have done had we died. It's just a very, very harsh truth of my job that sometimes, for want of a better expression, you have to play God. You have to make the decisions and the choices, however hard they are, that cost or save someone's life. And post-fire, that coupled with some other bits, which I won't go into today and tonight, but it started a downward spiral in my mental health. I began suffering with PTSD, and it affected my life massively. I began drinking too much. I began taking drugs. I turned into an awful partner, an awful dad. I was angry at everybody. I pushed people away. I just went on a journey of absolute total self-destruct, and things got so bad for me. The way I describe it is I had this sadness inside me, this pain that was so bad that no matter what was going on around me, that sadness was still there. If my girlfriend kissed me and told me she loved me, I felt sad. If it was my son's birthday, I felt sad. If it was my birthday, I felt sad. Christmas, Easter, sad. Parents visiting, sad. Seeing friends that I loved and cared about, that I used to enjoy good times with, still felt sad. There was no relief from it. There was no let up from that sadness that was destroying me at my core. And it got bad enough that one day I was sat on the floor of my living room and I just started crying and I couldn't stop. And I just couldn't cope anymore. And I remember thinking to myself, there is no way of getting rid of this sadness. This is going to be with me for the rest of my life. And if it's going to be with me for the rest of my life, I'd rather not live the rest of my life. And that was the first time that I ever thought about killing myself. And it wasn't because I didn't think the world cared or because I didn't think I had anyone around me that cared. It wasn't because I didn't have a fantastic support network, because I did. It wasn't because I didn't have family that loved me, because I did. And it wasn't because I didn't know my true value to those people, because I did. It was just because it hurt too much. The pain, the emotional pain that I was in was severe enough that death was a better option. And I'm just so lucky that I have the people in my life that I do, that saw these warning signs, that I was able to speak to, and that convinced me to visit my GP for antidepressants and the counselling and wellbeing team at the fire service for counselling rather than the other route. Because I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for those people that helped me. It's been a very long journey back. There's been a lot of damaged relationships I've had to repair. It has been hard and it has been a roller coaster ride. There have been times when I've said on news programs or TV shows, yeah, I'm great now, thanks for asking. And inside I was still broken. There were times when I genuinely thought and felt like I was great. And then one day, wallop, out of the blue, this tidal wave of sadness would hit me again. And I would feel broken again. And then I would feel scared. And it's very, very difficult as a man, particularly one that looks like me, that, you know, weight trains and boxes, and to be scared every day of bursting into tears for no reason in front of people is exhausting. And to feel scared that frequently is emasculating. It's a horrible, horrible feeling to have to live with, especially when you think that you're getting through it. You think you're improving, or you think you're over it. You know, I'm good now. I'm healed. I'm better. And then wallop, in a mess again. And it's made me really realize how hard the journey is back and how difficult that journey is if you do it on your own, because it was hard enough with support and love. And it's part of the reason why behind me I've got justrib.co.uk. That website is now my way of being booked to come and speak at events, so that I can talk to people about the things that we've spoken about today. So I can talk about mental health. I can talk about inclusion, religion, racism, things that have affected my life, the fire service, leadership, bravery, all of these things that are qualities and skill sets that people will need, hopefully never to the extreme that I've needed them, but nonetheless, elements that make up a good human being. And I now go around and I talk to people about my experiences, and I tell them what I have learned in the hope that they can draw inspiration from it or comfort from it. I always say to people that there's an old saying, misery loves company. And I've always taken that to mean something quite negative. But I've got a positive spin for it now, which is ultimately there is nothing that is going to help you or make you feel better when you are depressed or suffering from PTSD, apart from knowing that somebody else is suffering with you. And there is real genuine comfort in knowing you're not the only one. And then when you see that person heal and get better and succeed at things, it inspires you and it gives you hope, and it makes you realize that in actual fact, you can get better. You can heal. You can succeed. You can fight back from it. And I want to be an example to people, and I try to be an example to people of exactly that. I am here today recording this podcast with you because I survived PTSD and depression, where some people haven't. You know, I succeeded today because I woke up, and a lot of people didn't.
If you could narrow down one thing, one piece of advice you could give to anyone suffering from PTSD or depression or anything else, one thing, because I know you probably would have done a lot of things that helped, but really if you could narrow it down and wanted to give someone one takeaway, what would it be?
I think, and again, I'm not a trained counsellor and I'm not a trained mental health expert. I can only say what's worked for me. And the most important thing I learned through my sort of mental health journey has been honesty. And I mean that in all aspects. Be honest with yourself. Because if you justify crappy actions, you're not being honest with yourself, and you're not putting yourself in a position where you can heal. You have to be your harshest critic. You have to go, I am failing. That's okay. It's okay to fail. Of course you're failing. You're depressed. Of course you're failing. You're suffering with PTSD or anxiety or whatever it is. You will fail. But in acknowledging that, you give yourself options. You give yourself choices. I'm failing at this. So how do I stop failing? If you're honest with the people around you, I said to people, I can't come to that party. I can't come downstairs. Sometimes so it was, we'd have a house guest over. Oh, Rick, you coming down? No. Why? I can't. Why? I'm scared I'm going to burst into tears. It makes things uncomfortable sometimes. It makes people uncomfortable sometimes, but it also lets absolutely everybody know exactly where you're at and allows them and affords them the opportunity to support you. And if you are not honest with yourself and you are not honest with how you are feeling with the people around you, you do not allow people the opportunity to support you. And that is the greatest gift you can give someone, an opportunity to support you when you need it. Because the alternative is potentially taking your own life.
What's next in the world of in the wild world of Ricky Nuttall?
Well, there's a potential career change.
Oh, wow. Okay. You're not letting down your 3-year-old self, are you?
My 3-year-old self wanted to be a firefighter. I achieved that when I became a firefighter. My 3-year-old self didn't say retire as a firefighter.
True. Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm looking at options that will give me a safer working environment, that will give me a better work-life balance, that will allow me to spend more time with my friends and family, quality time. So, yeah, there's a potential change. I can't say too much at the moment because I'm not sure just yet what will happen with that. But I should know in a couple of weeks' time. And I'm pushing my business on justrick.co.uk. And by the way, if anyone wants to contact me that listens or watches the podcast, you can do so at justrick999 on Instagram or Twitter. And I'm more than happy for people to contact me if they just want to open up about something or talk to me about something. If I can't help or I don't have time to help, I will be honest about that. But I can signpost. I can let you know who might be able to help and where you can find that help. So yeah, career change, going to push on with my business. And my aim is going to be that within the next year, Just Rick will be giving me a full-time income. I would love that to be the case. So if anyone wants to book me to come and speak at their company, by all means, get in touch. I'm very good at what I do, and I'm very passionate about what I do, and I'm very honest about what I do, which is why I think it's a compelling talk.
Absolutely. And I can't vouch for you enough. I mean, that was absolutely the day I came, it just stole the show. It was unexpected as well because I didn't know you were part of it. I hadn't read the program, and then obviously I'd heard your podcast with him, and then to see you. And usually when you see speakers, you kind of see some of their material, you know what they're going to talk about, but I think it was the unexpected and your delivery and everything you said and the way you said everything was just, it was amazing. It really was. So yeah, I can only vouch for you. one word of advice: if you do see Rick, don't try and chase him because he will gas you. He'll be gone. Don't try and run after
Unless
him.
you shout, "I want to book you," in which case I'll probably slow down.
Do you reckon you're going to give SAS Who Dares Wins another crack?
Do you know what? I actually messaged the producer about that and just said to him, I'm in a better place now. I would love to give it another go, and maybe fortunately, maybe unfortunately, the answer came back that they never ever have anyone on twice. So that is a closed door. Unless I become a celebrity and then go on the celebrity version, I could become the first person to do the regular and the celebrity version.
I can't imagine what that was like to do, mate. Like, honestly, I know you had all the training and experience of a firefighter, but compared to that, being on camera, going through all of that, how was that?
You've got to really want to be there is what I would say. You've got to really want to be there. My reason for going on it was nothing more than having an opportunity to talk about what we've spoken about today, the Grenfell Tower fire, PTSD, to try and give some hope to emergency service workers or military service personnel that have struggled, are struggling, battled with PTSD, and give them a bit of hope that you can, in September 2017, I'm on the floor crying and suicidal. And in September 2020, I'm filming SAS Who Dares Wins. Not fully healed, but healed enough to do that. That's a story of hope and inspiration, I hope. So, unfortunately for me, once I'd had my opportunity to get that across, I had a lot less reason to be there. And I think for a lot of people, the motivation to stay is the activities that you do, the tests, the tasks, but they're all things that I do in my normal life. Abseiling and, climbing across high ropes and boxing and jumping off stuff into stuff. That's my life. So those bits weren't as exciting as they needed to be in order for me to endure the cold, wet, and being sworn at by Aunt Middleton and co. So, yeah.
I can see you in a jungle one day. Don't ask why. Back to your point, you have to be famous. I can see it. You know what? I'm going to say it. Today's date, whenever it is, you're going to be on the jungle and you're going to get my vote every round. Don't worry.
Nice. Cheers for that.